I don't know if I've covered all the basic training of Camp Robinson.
I don't remember.
From Camp Robinson we went to Camp Pickett, Virginia. I think that's where we started amphibian training.
Yeah, we went to amphibian training, and we went over in Europe with amphibian training. You were talking about amphibian training in Europe.
Well, I think we started amphibian training in Virginia. Then we were shipped out from Newport News, and then we went over. Yeah, then we went to Europe, to England, Pembroke Dock, in the country of Wales and southern England, and we did more amphibian training, literally daily training. And then I guess we were there 19 months, which is just short of 2 years. And things were just going like normal until one day we were given notice to send home all of our so-called valuables. We didn't have a lot, but if you had a ring or a wristwatch or a family picture, any of your pictures, why, we were told, you can leave it plugged in. We were told to send all these home. We were given large envelopes, and you'd stuff all of your personal things in the envelope, and they were sent home. And this kind of put a scare in us, because we knew something was going to happen where you didn't need your ring or your watch or whatever.
That would be
Of course,
scary.
we didn't send all our watches home, evidently, because I can recall being stripped after we were captured. Some of the German guards would strip our watches. You know, they just simply tear it off of your arm, and if you still had a watch. So from there we went, I think it was South Hampton, or near Southampton in England, which was a big seaport, and preparing to cross the channel to France. We all kind of, nobody seemed to announce it openly, you know, like we're going to France tomorrow morning. Nobody said that, but everybody knew that. Everybody kind of mentally, we knew that we were probably going to go into the invasion.
How did you kind of know that? I mean, that wasn't supposed to be top secret?
Well, that's why it was top secret. Nobody would talk. And in those days, I guess, you didn't ask questions. You were told, soldier, send your watch home, but don't ask questions. You were only a number by now. They didn't even call you by name. You had a number, and that's it.
At this point, did you have kind of a buddy that you stayed with?
Not
Or
that
you're still kind of on your own? And
I don't recall of a buddy, you know, close friend, because you really didn't have to have a buddy. Everybody was your buddy, so to speak. You're all in the same boots. If you went hungry, everybody else went hungry too. If you know, we were all trained like a group of mice, you might say. You know, you're all in this together. But when you say buddy, if you meant a close friend that you would meet with and talk with, I don't think you ever had a close buddy. Well, anyway, we got to Southampton, and this was one of the biggest marshalling areas, I think I said before, where there were acres and acres of tanks, trucks, planes, you name it, and there was literally by acres. And they were, if you think that here in a parking lot, cars are, well, they're spaced apart. Tanks, they are touching bumper to bumper. And between the tanks there's probably 3 inches. Different than a parking lot that you might encounter today where, you know, there's spaces, empty spaces. everything was just packed full of equipment of we never dreamed. Of course, we were kind of like only amphibian. That's all we knew was amphibian. All of a sudden we see tanks, and that's kind of a foreign word to see tanks upon tanks, you know. And we knew that we were moving onto the coast, and we moved on to large ships, and they happened to be British ships, and that was kind of a mistake too, because as long as you were with the United States, why you always were sure of getting good food.
Mm-hmm.
But with the British, we didn't.
You didn't have good food?
Well, nothing like the American food. I can recall we had, I think it was bean soup, I think it was. It was beans for sure. And they were white beans.
Mm.
And it was like a porridge or a soup. That's it. You got a bowl full of that, and that was it. Like Americans, you get a pork chop with a little ketchup and, you know, decent food. So I can remember going onto the ships, and of course you were too upset or whatever it was to sleep. So you didn't get any sleep, and with all the commotion of men moving, you didn't get any rest, and poor food on top of it didn't help it any at all. So that night we crossed the channel. We were on the British ships, and of course, to add to the confusion, this was all at night, and it was dark, and there's something about darkness that just complicates everything. Even your thinking is different in daylight than it is at night. Totally dark. If you were going down like a gangplank, you couldn't see where the plank ended. All you did was stay behind the guy that's ahead of you. You literally followed the guy in front of you. You know, that kind of mentality or thinking. Like cattle maybe being shipped to the stockyard. You don't have to see where you're going, just stay in the chute, you know.
Mm.
So we crossed the channel that night, and then I suppose, I don't know, we didn't document the time, but it must have been 1 or 2 o'clock, maybe somewhere in there. We unloaded off these big ships onto the landing craft. And then the landing craft, we of course weren't the so-called first ones to be at the beach. There were many waves ahead of us. So that created a problem for us. As far as I understand, I was in the 6th wave. That meant that while the first 5 waves were going ashore, you were in your landing craft, but all you were doing out in the ocean was making circles round and round and round, just killing time, because wave 4 went in, half an hour later wave 5 went in, and I guess it was, I know it was daylight, but I may be a little confused. I'd say it was like 8 o'clock in the morning for 6th wave, because it was totally daylight. But of course, daylight comes early, you know.
So how many men were in a wave, approximately?
I'd say in the thousands.
And you estimate about a half hour between each wave?
Must have been. I wasn't there standing on the beach clocking it, but if we were the 6th wave, and the first wave supposedly had started at about 3 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
3 o'clock in the morning. And while we were unloading our ship, first wave was already attacking the shore.
So 1, 2 in the morning, you think the first wave was already hitting the shore?
Oh, you bet.
So now,
But they had no luck. They couldn't get on shore because they were being literally shot right off of it.
so you're talking on D-Day, which is June 6th, 1945?
Or four.
44. Okay, so June 6, 1944, 1, 2 in the morning, you were getting onto the landing craft
That's right.
from your ships.
That's right.
So did all that training come back to mind when you were just out there driving around needlessly?
The only training that, yes, all the training helped. The only part that maybe didn't help is the riding around in the boat. Most of us, a lot of us, we always trained on beaches where the water was rather calm. Now we got thrown in the, I don't know if it's the North, it was the English Channel, but it's like an ocean out there where the waves are 10 feet, 8 and 10 feet, and now you're bouncing up and down and up and down, and you know, like a little bobber in the water. I think our training should have been a little more, done more in the heavier seas.
Now, when you're in the landing craft, you can't see over the top or the edges, can you? So
No.
you're kind of down in this
No.
ship.
The only time you can see over the edge is if your landing craft tips and you're going with a wave, a big wave, and your ship tips, you see the top of the ocean, and then it kind of looks like as if you're sinking. Then all of a sudden your boat comes back up again.
Did you ever see the land or the shore that you were heading towards?
Yeah.
What did you think about that, or what were your feelings?
Well, it was mostly smoke and fire, you know. Like on a daybreak, you have like everything lights up, but here you could see like as if the whole coastline was so dark with smoke that you could hardly see the coastline. Because a lot of this was the first waves that went in were hit, and their fuel supplies and whatnot were on fire.
Did you hear a lot of gunfire explosions from where you were in the
Oh
boat?
yeah,
How
yeah.
many-
But they were way off, kind of like, you know, this won't affect you, not realizing that your boat's gonna pull in there too as soon as everything was worked on the time, like 2:45. Okay, we got 7 minutes before we go in. Everything was done sort of by clockwork. It wasn't just a matter of hit or miss, you know.
How did you feel as you were getting closer and the sounds are getting closer? And when did you finally realize that you were going to be the one on the beach?
Well, you knew that way back when you first got on that landing craft. It's just that I don't know how you felt, tell you the truth. You kind of felt, well, you've already given up your life or whatever, and whatever happens here, so what? Or I just don't know how we really felt, but it's a different feeling, kind of like, I suppose, cattle going to slaughter. What's the use of, we're here now, we got to do this. And we were scared, there's no question about that. But we were lucky, we were the sixth wave. We got on shore without too much trouble. And the first night, the first day, our main job was to advance. The first day we made about 200 yards on shore. And 200 yards isn't very far. And we stopped there and dug foxholes, trying to just avoid being hit by artillery. And then of course the next day we started to move out, and we started to see road signs in French or in German. In French, that'd have to be, this was in France, to certain towns. And we then no longer were amphibian, then we were just plain ordinary ground troops. To take a town, that was the battle cry was to take the next town, and
Did you have a specific town that you had to target, or were you just to gain as much ground as possible?
well, both, I suppose, gain as much ground and take over these towns, and especially a town was valuable if it had railroads, if it had a large highway intersection. Oh, you'd fight, or a bridge. Oh, there's all kinds of with when you're in the destruction business. Destruction. Bridges, church steeples are a premium
Why is that?
because that's where your snipers hide. Not only your snipers, but your artillery observers. They sit up in the church thing and they can see you, and they can call up their people and say, well, you're overshooting with your artillery, shorten up by 100 yards. And we were there, we were wondering, how in the hell they're so accurate, how come? Well, look up in the church steeple, they've got an observer up there. So down comes the church steeple. That's the next,
So there's no kind of worries or respect when the war is going on for any kind of religious temples? Or
oh no, well,
everything's a target or a threat
that's right.
without emotion.
In some wars or someplace, they always felt that the churchyard and the monastery was a safe haven where you lay down your rifle and you wouldn't fight. But not in World War II. That's some of our biggest problems came from church steeples. But of course, what could the poor priest do when the German army came there with and said, told the minister, the priest, how do you get up in your tower? He'd have to tell him. He'd have to show him the way, even though he knew that his church wasn't made for that purpose. Well, anyway.
Well, let me ask you now. On June 6th, you landed on the beach, early morning, 8 o'clock or something
Yeah,
like that.
I see.
And you spent most of that day right on the beach. You made it in a couple 100 yards, and then you dug in, and you stayed there overnight
The first night, yes,
on the beach.
on the beach.
So there were other waves coming behind you. So did
Yeah.
they kind of camp with you or behind you, or?
Must have been behind us. Well, maybe it was more than 200 yards. It could have even been a mile. I don't remember that. But we didn't go too far on the beach.
But the next day, then you said that it was pretty much open. You just kept going.
Yeah.
So there wasn't much resistance there by the second day.
Well, in some places, as I read in the books now, the story that whoever it was in command of the German tanks held back in certain places with his tanks. They could have blown us away, I suppose, but they didn't. They were waiting for something else to happen. And meanwhile, we sort of spearheaded and got in far enough. So we start raising hell with the towns, and anytime somebody starts blasting your town, it takes a lot of people. If 100, let's say, it takes 200 to stop them. It takes more power to stop. Well, anyway, we moved onto the coast. Moved inland, and we started to.
Do you remember any names of the towns that you first saw when you landed?
well, Yeah, there are a lot of them. Wiltz is one. St. Lo was another one, and I don't know why. St. Lo was a hell of a battle. I think that the battle lasted like 3 days. Usually a battle lasts about 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And after 15 minutes, either one side or the other side takes over the town. St. Lo, and I don't know if that was Rivers or Crossroad or what, but I recall St. Lo was a hard one to take.
Mm-hmm.
The German army protected that fiercely.
Did you meet some of the French people as you were marching inland? Do you remember if they were friendly or kind of indifferent?
They were friendly, but you couldn't trust them.
Why is that?
Because you didn't know if you were talking to a Frenchman that was sympathizing with the Germans, or he was lying to you. In fact, you couldn't even, many of them would come out with beer and wine and what the hell was the other French drink. You wouldn't even drink that for fear that they spiked it with some poison or something. No. You wouldn't eat any of their food.
You were told this by your...
Oh yeah, you got all the training. You may be thirstier than hell and nice cold beer, but don't accept it. Or, you know, when you're in a place like that, you don't accept, you know, bribes or things from foreigners, because there's nothing on them that their identification doesn't tell them, doesn't tell you that they are for you. In fact, we used to kind of laugh at that in like second-story windows. If we take a town, the street, they used to holler, the people would hang American flag out the window and yell something like Viva la America, I think, when we took the town. And then there was a hell of a battle and there'd be no flags out, and then if the Germans would win over us, then they'd stick out the German flag and holler Viva la Bouche. La Bouche means the German. Bosch. Yeah, Bosch. So the people were kind of going whichever way the war was going. So you never want to trust what you saw either. Well, I guess this went on for several months, from June, well, it's more than several months, from June to December. About the only thing I can recall is every day, every mile, you lose men. You know, shot, killed, wounded, sick, whatever.
Did you actually see men getting shot or killed?
Oh, every day.
When you landed on the beach?
Every day.
Did that affect you, or
Well,
how do you interpret that?
I don't know what you mean by interpret that, but
What I was asking about is, you had seen men get shot, get killed, which is an experience that I'll probably never have. And you were 19 at the time, and it was probably the first time that you ever saw anybody get killed. I'm just curious, and how does it affect somebody? How do you handle that kind of vision when it's so blatant in front of you, when you see somebody get shot or get killed?
well, I guess first of all I'd say that it isn't easy to see. I've had 2 close calls of people killed around me. One was, I remember his name, Jablonski. He's a Polish guy, Jablonski. The night that we were captured, yes. Jablonski, his arm, he was hit by artillery, and his arm was tore off someplace up here, or broken off. And first of all, Jablonski was very nervous. He'd get nervous if a mosquito flew overhead. And I remember the medics, but before the medics got there, I gave him either a towel or rag, and we had to tie up his arm. Maybe it was down here, I don't remember exactly. But we tied up his arm to stop the bleeding, and Jablonski was kind of complaining, like saying, "Oh, what's I do, or something." And we literally comforted him and said, no, the medics are coming, you'll be all right, just hold that towel tight. And we turned him over to the medics. Medics would take care of him. We as fighting soldiers, we were literally not allowed to help the wounded, you know. Your job was to move ahead and fight the enemy. Leave those guys that are dead or hit, leave them lay somebody else to take care of them. Like the medics.
Did Jablonski make it then?
I don't know. I don't know. We went to the prison camp. I kind of doubt whether Jablonski made it, because I doubt whether the Germans would give him any hospital care. You know, literally you said is, go to hell, you Americans. Well, they told us this many times. Good for you, Americans. You shouldn't be over here in the first place, or something, that kind of attitude. So I kind of doubt whether Jablonski made it.
There weren't any medics, any American medics around?
Oh yeah, yeah, but medics always, they were quite a ways back.
Oh.
And you could nearly bleed to death by the time the medics got to you, you know. Another time, a buddy of mine, closer buddy, we were being strafed at the prison camp many times over and over. I guess you heard that. And we were laying by the side of the barracks, and he got shot in the back with a .50 caliber. And when that goes through you, that separates your liver from your toes, from, you know, a hole like you can't believe. Well, you won't see the hole when he's hit, but you sure can tell he's hit hard, because within 30 seconds there's about a gallon of blood under him, you know. So you know he's been hit pretty hard.
But emotionally, how does that make you feel? Do you remember feeling anything?
I don't know, you just walked away from it and said, well, I don't know. I just don't know how when you're 19 years old, you don't seem to have that much fear. If it happened today, oh my God, I have a heart attack if I just cut my finger, you know. So I don't know how we really handle it, but it kind of gets in your blood that you don't make no big deal over it. Sergeant Greenway, same way. Good guy, always treated us right. And he was out, he was the kind of guy would say, okay, you guys stay here and stay hidden under these trees, and I'll go out and check out the intersection where we've got to go. Well, he no sooner got that intersection, an artillery shell dropped practically on top of him and blew him to pieces. Greenway. Kind of a good guy. He always had a heart, or always had compassion for the soldiers. No, you guys stay there. I'll go ahead and check it out. He didn't, like we had a Lieutenant Rice. He'd always appoint one of us, go and check out that bridge. You know, he wouldn't go, but he'd send one of us. So the difference of leadership. Our American Army was always a good army to fight with, because we always fought in full strength. For example, a company was, roughly speaking, 300 men, and if you lost 20 men, the next day your company commander would call a pool somewhere of soldiers and say, I need 20 men because I lost 20 yesterday, now I only have 280, and we were brought back to full strength, 300. Replacements replacing the replacements. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So compared to, you say, well, what, no big deal about that? Yes, there is. The German army didn't have that pool in their army. If they lost 20 men today, the next day they'd fight with 280. The next day they lost 20, now they're down to 260. Give them a week and they were down to 55. So our company of 300 would be fighting what was left of their company, 55, you know. And while you take 300 just in numbers, 300 fighting 55, wow, what the hell. We make short order of them, we'll send some around this way, some around that way, and they'll attack them from the back, and we'll attack them from the front. We make mincemeat out of them in short order. So it does make a difference. A lot of these things that I say probably don't make a whole lot of sense, but if you study the military rules, it makes sense. So replacements were always brought up to full strength. Finally, I guess, came the time, a last desperate chance. The German army knew they were getting beat, but they thought as a last desperation they would throw everything at us that they had and try to encircle us, which became later known as the Battle of the Bulge. In which we were kind of under strength and underpowered. That means we didn't have too many tanks, and when they came at us with many tanks, big tanks, and a lot of soldiers. So then we were, let's say if we were 300 and they came at us with 600 plus 10 tanks, we were just simply overpowered in the Battle of Bulge. So our last day as soldiers, we took up the high points in a castle where we were up like on the 3rd floor, but a castle isn't built that way like on the 3rd floor. It had like stairs or whatever going up, and eventually the poor old castle was hit by German shells so hard, so many times, that it was leveled from 3 floors to 2 floors and to 1 floor. And then we tried running out, escaping being captured, and I know one time we ran down some stairs, concrete steps, and the bullets, we were on step 10 and the bullets hit step 8, and it was like red popcorn. The bullets were being shot at.
See them?
Yes. Well, you can see them, you don't see them coming through the air, but you see them when they ricochet, when they hit those steps and then ricochet, and I call that, to say that it's red popcorn is maybe exaggerating a little bit, but that's just about how it appeared. So we ran back up the stairs. We made a second attempt trying to crawl out a sewer pipe out of the castle. The sewer pipe must have been 4, maybe 5 feet in diameter. And we walked out, we must have been hundreds of yards out that pipe, only to find out we peeked out the end of the pipe and there's a tank sitting there, a German tank. They must have figured that those goddamn Americans are going to come out this sewer.
Was the tank blocking the sewer, or what was it doing?
Well, you could say that it was blocking the anything that comes out of that sewer.
Did it have its gun aimed at the opening?
Oh, I don't recall that, but if they would have saw us, they'd have certainly got their gun over on us quickly. So we ran back up to the sewer. We couldn't get out that way, so we had no other choice but give up. Oh, well, give up. The place started to burn on fire. I don't know if it was incendiaries or what, but the place started to burn, and we knew we had to get up. So Captain Mackey, our captain, we heard of prisoners that were shot with their own guns, and that's about the worst thing you can have done to you, is get shot by your own bullet. So Captain Mackey told us to take out the firing pins, and we took out the firing pins, and we threw them away. So as your last pledge on earth, you could say you were shot by an enemy soldier, not by your own gun. Isn't that kind of weird thinking?
Mm-hmm.
So we threw away our firing pins. But as luck had it, we weren't harmed. I think by this time they had a international agreement through Geneva, Switzerland, that you don't treat prisoners that way, and you Germans are guilty of doing that, and we somehow were saved because they were afraid to assassinate, or because there were times when soldiers were captured and they were simply machine gunned down. So, but we were we were relinquished from that and captured as soldiers. We of course had to give up our guns and maybe lost our wristwatches. And I remember in Clerveaux, a lot of things happened that day. It was December 18, week before Christmas. One of the famous German generals, von Rundstedt, here comes a convertible four-door racing into town, and the damn car didn't even stop, and this general literally glittered in the sunshine with all his medals, began to shout at us, and I thought, oh boy, here we go, you know, and swearing in German. And I thought, boy, here we go, we're gonna get the axe now. But von Rundstedt simply, through our interpreters, simply was mad because the war wasn't going right, and he said in his shouting, "You goddamn Americans should stay in America where you belong, not over here." You know, and he cussed and swore. Von Rundstedt must have been like number 2 or 3 man from the top, you know. His word was big words, you know. But anyway, we start walking from that town. You can't imagine how happy you are inside that you weren't slaughtered at that moment. The sun went down that night and you were still alive with a couple hundred of your buddies. So we start marching. We didn't know where we were going.
The castle was in Clerveaux.
Clerveaux.
Now, was the castle kind of in a town or outside
Yes,
of town?
right in a town.
In the center of town.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Center of town. The night before we were shelled, a friend of mine and I walked downtown, which was only a block or two, and we came upon a bakery, and the baker was hard at work, sweating, and we noticed that he was baking something we recognized, which were cream puffs. And so we said, "How much are they?" "Oh," he said, "those are expensive." Well, how much, when you say expensive, how much are they? "Well, those are expensive. Those are 3 cents a piece." I looked at my buddy, and we had $10 bill here. "How many should we take? 2 or 4 for ourselves?" "No, let's buy our whole group." We had a group of maybe 20 back in our barracks in the castle. So I don't know, we ordered 3 or 4 dozen. And the guy, I remember the baker says, "If you order them, you have to pay for them when you place the order." and you can pick them up tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. They'll be all fresh baked. Well, we never got there to pick. We paid for them, but we still got them coming yet today. We never picked them up.
Because you were captured the next
Well, they started to shell the town, and we wouldn't dare walk downtown once the shelling started, especially going to a bakery, which is kind of useless, going to a bakery. In fact, it would be nearly against military rules to buy and eat these cream puffs. Because you as a soldier, you eat in the mess hall. Of course, we didn't even have a mess hall in the castle, so, but you strictly eat the army food. You never know what's in those goddamn cream puffs. They could have laced them with something, but in those days they didn't. Today I think it'd be more dangerous to buy because they'd be laced with some poison or something, so.
Well, was there ever any thought given to how the Germans knew that you were in the castle? Or was it such a big group that it was obvious that the Americans were in the castle?
I don't know how they knew we were there. I would judge they knew because of the activity. If you look at Luxembourg, it's all big valleys, and you can look with binoculars for maybe 2 or 3 miles across the valley, and you can see there's a lot of American soldiers around that castle. And they knew we were there, and they came at us with the right weapons too. They came with what they called, the Germans had 88s mounted on like a tank chassis. It was like a tank, but it carried an 88. And I don't understand weaponry, but an 88, I do know this from facing the 88, normally an artillery piece will fire the artillery piece, and it flutters through the air, and it takes about 2 minutes or 3 minutes to hit the target, and then it explodes at your target. In 88, when the puff of smoke went out of the barrel, it would literally hit its target about the same second, like a boom, boom. It was there immediately. You didn't even have time to hide or duck or get down when that 88 fired. Well, that's what they were using at the castle. They'd hit that castle, one of those goddamn 88s, and 2 ton of stone and plaster would come down. And we were down at the bottom. In fact, we were covered with plaster dust so bad that you couldn't hardly breathe. So, I guess
you got captured by Rundstedt. What else do you remember about Rundstedt? Was he surrounded by a lot of other kind of staff people, or?
No.
What did he do after he left you? Did he just speed off just as quick as he came?
Just sped away, got back in his car. I think he sat down and got the hell out of there. But he sure scared the hell out of us, because by the way he was swearing and shouting, we knew that an infuriated person is apt to do most anything. If he'd come there talking quietly, we wouldn't make much of it. But he was totally excited. He's wearing the monocle, always in his pictures. That's why we knew it was Rundstedt. Evidently he had one bad eye, so he wore a monocle in one eye, and then somehow they have a string attached to it in case it falls out, it doesn't hit the ground. Well, I guess maybe I'll continue next time.
Okay.